Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Thursday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Yesterday, very excitingly, depending on your point of view, James Gunn and Peter Safran were celebrating 1 year since they announced Gods and Monsters Part 1. Part 1 of the new DC slate of DC Universe, the new DC franchise being built by James Gunn and Peter Safran. For me, I am excited. I understand the politics around this. You know, the fan base is divided. There's people who love what Snyder did and what Cavill did and what Affleck did, etc., that are very angry with James Gunn for not continuing with Henry Cavill. I love the Snyderverse, but I'm very, very excited. I'm going to talk about in a bit what I think about Gods and Monsters and what I think about James Gunn's plan. I did tell him this on Threads. I told him that I was rather skeptical at first, and I'll tell you what else I said to him. But this is what James Gunn had to say about his feelings of it being a year since Gods and Monsters Part 1 was announced. 1 year ago today, Peter Safran and I introduced our DC slate for the first time. Thanks to all of you for the support you've given us throughout the year. Today's Superman Legacy is about to start production. Episodes of Creature Commandos are being finished that will release later this year. At least 2 more projects, which has got everyone talking, are gearing up to go in the next couple of months. Amazing scripts keep coming in and incredible talent are being attracted to new projects, planned and unplanned. Thank you. Now this is very, very interesting. He says there's 2 more projects that will start up or going into production or whatever in the next few months as well. Some people are guesstimating that's Peacemaker Series 2. Now, I think he's going to be front and center of that production, and considering Superman Legacy starts shooting in March, I think it's going to take him more than 2 months, even with today's shooting schedules, to be able to go from Superman Legacy to Peacemaker. But Peacemaker could start up production without him being there. We will see. And there's something else going into production or starting off. There's also rumours that they're starting the casting process for the DCU Batman, which is very, very exciting, and fans already doing their casting choices and things like that. Because I've never heard of most of the actors, I'm not going to talk about the actors they're talking about because I have no idea who they're talking about. So I can't venture opinions on actors I've never seen and don't know who they are. The geek community just pluck out kind of fan castings all the time of people I've never heard of. I do like what he said here. It's gratitude towards the fans who have supported him. A lot of DC fans have supported him. A lot haven't. Some fans, namely vocal Snyder fans, the bad side of the fandom, have been abusing him, calling him this, that, the other. It was very interesting what happened to me with a bunch of Snyder fans who weren't very nice to me yesterday, considering they know I'm a Snyder fan. But when did this stop this toxic side of the fandom? So Matthew Vaughn, I think he's the director of Argylle starring Henry Cavill, right? He said he's very happy with the casting of Millie Alcock. He thinks if he was on that production, he would have also cast Millie Alcock. But he doesn't understand how there's not a director attached to Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow and suddenly somebody's cast an actor for that movie. He goes, there should be a director doing the casting for the lead character. But Matthew is a big Henry Cavill loyalist, first of all. I'm not saying he's he's trying to dirt talk James Gunn. But here's the thing, Matthew. Millie Alcock wasn't just cast to be in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. She wasn't just cast to be in one film. The reason they've cast her so soon, because most probably she's going to appear in Superman Legacy. Now, also, there's another reason. She's going to be part of this franchise, right? She's probably going to be in Superman Legacy, and she's been cast to be in a franchise, not one film. That's why James Gunn, the creative arm of DC Universe, did the casting, or was at the forefront of that casting decision. Yes, he brought Millie to Peter Safran. So Millie was always getting this job because James Gunn wanted her. What James Gunn wants, James Gunn gets, because he's the creative authority. He's the creative arm of DC Universe. So it's right that he cast her. Anyway, I said this on the Variety article. I commented on the Variety article that spoke about Matthew Vaughn's comments. Some people liked what I said, but Snyder fans started sending me a bunch of screenshots that, James Gunn saying that he won't be doing all the casting. Well, he's not going to be doing all the casting, but he's going to be doing a lot of the important casting. Then I got a bunch of screenshots about Zack Snyder casting Jason Momoa and, not James Wan. Now, that's an interesting one as well. I think that's people proving the point that Zack Snyder actually cast Jason Momoa and not the director of the film. So Snyder fans saying that it's wrong or, James Gunn's a liar, blah, blah, blah. But that's irrelevant. In the end, you've got to ignore the negative element. I love the Snyderverse. I wish Zack finished what he started. I wish he was treated like a human being instead of the way he was treated. And now rumours are saying that Toby Emmerich could be taking over from Scott Stuber at Netflix. That's not good for Zack Snyder because these people do hold a grudge, but we'll see. But Zack will probably end up going off with Scott Stuber and whatever studio he's creating anyway. But this is the DC Universe Daily, and Zack Snyder no longer, despite to what some of his fans say, is no longer working on DC. But James Gunn is. So this is what I said to James Gunn about his plan. I said at the beginning I was very skeptical of his plan because of what had already happened with the DCEU. We had so many slates that never happened. But I actually like the outline of his plan. I like the idea of a living, breathing DC Universe in Superman Legacy. I like the idea of a Guy Gardner in Superman Legacy. Now, James says every DC character in that film has a reason connected to Superman or Lois in that film. So that's very interesting and exciting. I like that. I love the casting, all the casting so far, especially for Superman Legacy. I like the slate. I like the titles. I'm excited for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I'm excited by Millie Alcock's casting. A very, very talented young actor. That's going to be interesting. But she hasn't just been cast to be in one film. She's been cast to be in a franchise, and that's why it's right. James Gunn cast her at the end of the day. So propaganda merchants will be propaganda merchants and come out with their shit. So James Gunn liked what I said, that I like the outline of his plan. I like that he's implementing DC comic book writers like Tom King and other ones to advise him on what he's doing. I said years ago, before I even started this platform, that I think that a comic book writer could very easily write a comic book movie. And I've been kind of disappointed that we haven't had more comic book writers from DC or Marvel actually writing these movies. Who knows these characters the best, right? Writing is writing. People who say, well, writing a comic book's different to writing a script. All they have to do is write the outline of a story, which is basically what they do, in their comics, right? And we saw Alan Heinberg co-writing Wonder Woman 2017. Didn't do a bad job, if I do say so myself. So my point's proven there. So that's something else that I like. I'm also very intrigued by the Authority, and I'm very intrigued by Creature Commandos. I also like how James has spoken about the problems at the MCU. I also like the fact we're not going to be getting 4 to 6 DC projects or movies or streaming like shows a year. I think the days of giving us too much, having too much of a good thing, have gone. So I'm glad he's not doing that, and I'm happy he's allowing Superman Legacy to breathe as a film on its own. Because next year, it's literally, I think, Superman Legacy and maybe Peacemaker on streaming. The hype is going to be with Superman. Superman deserves that. And it was the same thing with Superman Returns and Man of Steel as well. They had their own space. At the end of the day, it depends on the movie. It depends how good the movie is, how the movie's received. It has to be successful. We all know that. James Gunn knows that. Make no mistake. James Gunn knows that what he's doing has to work. And it has to be, it's about money, it's about box office. Like when The Rock was promoting Black Adam. He said, if we don't make any money, we don't continue. Even though he was telling us what he wanted to do, he's been in the industry, right? He's not a kid. He's been in the industry. He understands if your movie don't make fucking money, as his movie didn't make enough money, he couldn't carry on. He's a pro. He understands that. And so is James Gunn. So I like the fact that he's building this brand new universe, and I think what he's building is exciting and very interesting. But look, you can criticize people that you respect. So I respect James Gunn as a good writer-director. He interfered in a lot of DC projects that came out last year. I criticised that. I was right to criticise that. He called the Flash movie one of the best, movies in that genre, right? Clearly, he doesn't really feel that. I don't want to speak for James, but it's pretty obvious he doesn't think that film is one of the best in the genre, although he did give Andres Muschietti, the director of that film, Brave and the Bold, which is Batman's introduction to the DC universe, unless he's in Superman Legacy or The Authority or something else. And as I said, they are looking to cast Batman now. Apparently, one scooper has said, James Gunn hasn't said that's not true yet, but James Gunn is on threads a lot. He answers a lot of questions. I think he feels, this is one of the things that James Gunn has always done very, very well. He's very active with the fans. Many, many years ago, before he came to DC, or just as he was doing Suicide Squad, I followed him on Instagram, and I just replied. You know when you reply to, like, public figures, celebrity stories, and you don't really think you're going to get anything? But he actually started talking to me via his story, and I was really, really shocked. And it was a good conversation. And I've spoken to him many times on social media. He does speak to the fans. Obviously, if you can abuse him, more often than not, he's not going to respond. But I think he's willing to have a little debate with fans, And I think in that element, he's a good guy. I think, look, if you want to look at every mistake the guy has ever made in his real life, like the tweets, like the problematic tweets, if you give me your life history, I can judge you and say, you said this, you did that, you patted that woman on the bum or whatever you did, right? I'm sure you've all done things that we wouldn't think are good. I bet you've had bad faults before, right? And if I knew your bad faults, I'd judge you for them. If you knew my faults, you'd probably judge me for them, right? And I'm sure if you looked at my life in its entirety, you would think, Jesus Christ, Mick, you're a bad fucking person. I mean, once upon a time, I sold my dad's record collection so I could go down the pub with my mates, right? Down a second-hand place called the Jukebox. Horrible, disgusting behaviour. I'm sorry. So I've done a lot of bad shit in my life as well. Not proud of it, by the way. So what I'm saying to you is, oh my God, I'm going to lose subscribers now, aren't I? Not that I've got many to lose anyway. But anyway, keeping on the subject, please stay here on Movies TV Mad. Everyone does bad shit, right? This is going to be all over the internet. Mick sold his father's record collection. Very, very bad behaviour. Maybe you can comment down below and let me know the bad shit you've done in your life, right? No, let's have a little conversation here. We've all done things we're not proud of. Let's admit to them. Now, the really dark deeds, the really law-breaking deeds, I don't want to know about that. I just mean little misdemeanors, right? So at the end of the day, James Gunn isn't perfect. My point is, neither are you, and neither am I. And that's okay. Human beings make mistakes. But as a creative, I like him. At the very least, he's trying to create something. He's trying to bring DC to life in his own way. Snyder did it his way, and Gunn will do it his way. Now, the vocal Snyder fans are really hoping, with all the propaganda and all the hatred they put out there, that it sticks with fans and fans decide not to embrace what Gunn's doing. So a very toxic piece of artwork of Millie Alcock. Do you know what? Earlier on when I was talking about Millie, did I say Millie Gibson? I may have said Millie Gibson, so I apologise. Millie Gibson plays Ruby Sunday on Doctor Who. Anyway, Millie Alcock, Jesus, I'm like Ross from Friends saying I take the Rachel instead of the Emily. Anyway, so yeah, I forgot where I was now. Anyway, so that's it. So a Snyder fan mocked up a toxic piece of artwork of Millie Alcock in her Supergirl costume. And it's toxic, and it says James Gunn's Supergirl. This is the type of thing they're doing. Now, to be clear, most Snyder fans, like myself, are very placid people who just talk about what we love, about what Zack did in DC. But there's a lot of toxic people who can't control themselves. Now, we get a lot of female actresses and females saying, you know, men are bad, toxic masculinity. When you draw up and mock up things like that, you make the rest of us, other men, look bad. And you prove these women's points. And this is the problem today. But anyway, let's try and keep away from the toxicity in entertainment, in conversations about entertainment today. I spoke about that in yesterday's video, but today we're back to talking about DC. So I think, yes, we should be celebrating the year anniversary since James Gunn announced Gods and Monsters. As I say, I don't agree with everything that James does and says. As I say, he interfered in last year's DCEU movies. The Flash movie wasn't better for his interference. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom wasn't better for his interference. Now, he didn't seem to interfere or want to interfere with Shazam! Fury of the Gods because it didn't really have anything to do with what he wanted to do. That's interesting. Anyway, he did interfere hugely with the Flash movie and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We already know that. But the beauty of it is the way DC Studios is set up, him and Peter are in charge, and, you know, they will bring on the people they want to bring on. They will orchestrate what they want this to be. Sometimes directors like James Mangold doing Swamp Thing will have absolute freedom, and some lesser experienced directors won't have that freedom. That's okay as long as they agree on that from the beginning. When Zack Snyder came in, he wasn't told he was going to be policed like he was. He thought he could come in and do what he wanted because Christopher Nolan said, you know, you can come in and do what you wanted. But the studio behind Nolan didn't ever tell Snyder he would have the freedom. That's the problem. DC Studios is a studio run by Safran and James Gunn. Let's talk a little bit about Peter Safran because people don't talk about Peter Safran. You may not be interested to talk about Peter Safran. You may not want to know my thoughts on Peter Safran. Even in the old days when I used to watch kind of the interviews with Safran when he was talking about the first Shazam or when he was talking about Joker or the first Aquaman, I always liked the way he spoke. He sounded like a really sophisticated, intelligent guy, and I thought this guy should be running DC instead of Hamada. Now, of course, he was very much a big part of the Hamada verse, and a lot of those movies were DC movies I either didn't like or I found very, very mid. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think that I like him. Look, I like him. I think he's a good guy. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he is sophisticated. And I think he and James Gunn together are a good team because you've got the bureaucrat producer, the guy who does the production side of things. And then you've got Gunn, who is the creative arm. Now, when James was asked if he's the Kevin Feige of DC now, he goes, no, actually, that's the kind of job that Peter does. Interesting with Feige, he's the creative arm and the production arm of Marvel Studios. Basically, without Kevin Feige, nothing happens over at Marvel Studios. Now, Kevin Feige, for me, created something amazing at the beginning. He created a franchise that would be a TV series on the cinema screen. Like every film would be a chapter, and it worked. And the early films were brilliant. Phase 2 was brilliant. Phase 3 mostly was okay. I think the problems really started in Phase 3. Everyone says Phase 4 was this, that, and the other. But I think the problems did start in Phase 3, and I saw the problems. But originally, Feige come up with a very, very good idea. And one of his great ideas was to bring in James Gunn to do a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. He knew that Gunn was a big fan of Guardians. And one of my first reactions of seeing the first Guardians was, I wanted to be Peter Quill. I felt $1,000,000. I was walking around and I had the song in my head. Oh, I've got a feeling. That's how I felt when I first saw Superman the movie. I wanted to be Superman. I felt inspired. And that's one thing James Gunn can do. And maybe that's a good quality for doing a Superman movie, because that's what they want to do. They want a Superman that inspires you, the audience. Now, lots of people tell me, lots of fellow Snyder fans tell me that Henry Cavill's Superman inspires them. Does Henry Cavill's Superman inspire you? That's interesting. There are moments in Man of Steel and BVS when he fights Doomsday where I am inspired by Superman, but in a different way to how Tom Welling inspired me as Clark, or how Christopher Reeve inspired me as Superman, or to a lesser extent how Brandon Routh inspired me at times in Man of Steel when he's lifting New Krypton up, and that's a brilliant moment for me as well. Now, very interestingly, a few weeks ago we heard that David Corenswet tried on the Man of Steel costume. Now, James Gunn revealed this. Now, this kind of wound up a lot of Snyder fans because he said it was difficult for David to fit into this costume because David is taller than Henry. Or that's what he tried to say. So, was he trying to say my Superman is taller than Cavill? And that's one of the reasons that I didn't keep Cavill as Superman, because I believe that Superman should be tall, or taller than Cavill. Yeah, I think that Henry Cavill is a shorter Superman. You can tell he's not a really, really tall Superman, but he's a buff Superman, right? He's a shorter, stodgier Superman, but he looks the part. Henry Cavill is a great Superman, and he looked a great Superman in that great costume that Michael Wilkinson designed. Don't get it twisted. But I think sometimes we can look at things too deeply, and maybe James was just making the point that David found it hard to fit into that costume, because since the beginning of time, every actor auditioning for the role for Superman wears the previous costume. Christopher Reeve wore a kind of just a mock-up of what he was going to wear, like Henry Cavill wore the Reeve suit when he was doing auditions as well. And so, yeah, I think there is a lot to look forward to. There's a lot of pros and cons with James Gunn. The interference in last year's films was a red flag to me. But I think the outline of his DC Universe plan is a good one. It's an interesting one. But unfortunately, films are not based on outlines and a lot of talk. A film has to interest the audience. You have to sit there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. There's another rumour that Superman Legacy may be a 3-hour movie. Now, that's an interesting one because I think James Gunn was showing off all the designs he's done and all the artwork, all the concept designs he's done for the movie. And there was all these different cards in this kind of briefcase or whatever it was. Because there's so many, people are assuming it could be a 3-hour movie. But just because he's done a lot of artwork and a lot of, of that stuff, it doesn't mean it's going to be a 3-hour movie. But it's interesting how people put 2 and 2 together and get 6 billion. I'd love an epic 3-hour Superman movie. Critics will criticise it for being too long. Some critics are going to already be looking at this movie before they even see it and saying, is this movie overstuffed? That's an interesting question. Is having all these DC characters, as well as Superman and Lois and Jimmy and Perry and all of that in this movie, going to make it overstuffed? No, because overstuffed is a criticism I never go with. They said Batman Returns was overstuffed. I never felt that way. They said BVS was overstuffed. I never felt that way. I didn't think Wonder Woman being in it made it overstuffed. And I don't think a few CCTV cameos of Aquaman and, and Cyborg and the Flash made it an overstuffed movie. And I mean, the extended edition is 3 hours of BVS, so how can a 3-hour movie ever be overstuffed, you absolute planks? No. So I don't think having other DC characters in Superman Legacy is a bad thing. In fact, as I said earlier, it means it's a living, breathing DC universe, and it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing. I think Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner is going to be fucking epic. I think Gunn's brother as Maxwell Lord will be interesting because despite what some vocal Snyder fans say, actually, he's, Sean Gunn is actually a very talented guy. You look at the work he's done just on Guardians. He's a very, very talented man in his own right. So he's not just putting this guy in, he hasn't just cast this guy as Maxwell Lord because he's his brother. Of course, that's part of the reason. But he's talented. Don't get it twisted. Sean Gunn is a talented guy. Right? So you can keep on saying, oh, he's casting his brother, he's casting his wife. So far, he hasn't put his wife in DC Universe. Of course, there'll be lots of toxicity if she comes back to Peacemaker 2. I think Peacemaker 2 will have mainly a brand new team, apart from Cena coming back as the character. I think Waller's daughter will return as well. The actress is now critically acclaimed. She's been in the reboot of A Colour Purple. So she's doing well for herself as well. But I think she will be back because they were asking her about when season 2 starts shooting. And she was answering questions. So I'm assuming she's involved. But we will have a brand new team, but also some old favourites coming back. I'm looking forward to Peacemaker 2 because I think Peacemaker is probably James Gunn's best work ever. So, yes, I'm excited for this brand new DC universe. As much as I loved the Snyderverse, it wasn't for everyone. And now we are in a situation where DC Universe must be for everyone, or as many fans and as many members of the general audience as possible. Because at the end of the day, we are a business. So when I pitch something, right, to a studio or a production company, when I'm writing it, I've got to have in mind that I'm pitching it for a business. So I can't just pitch something. I can't pluck something out of my arse, right, and say, yeah. I have to understand that it's a business and it has to be appealing to the studio, to the advertisers, the sponsors. But most importantly of all, you need to get butts in seats, whether it's streaming, TV, movies. And that's what you've got to think about. Now, I've never successfully pitched anything, so clearly, that says a lot about me, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying. But they're the parameters you've got to look at. So at the end of the day, the problem with the Snyderverse, the problem with the DCEU, it wasn't for everyone. And I think Snyder's work is aging beautifully. I love it. I will always love those 3 movies. I think they're fucking outstanding. Don't get what I'm saying twisted, because that's easy to misconstrue what I'm saying. Well, the other day, making a video, you were saying how much you love the Snyderverse. Yes, I do. I love the Snyderverse. I do. And I also said that Man of Steel will be, something for James Gunn that, people will compare James Gunn's Superman Legacy to. And I still believe that. But at the very least, James Gunn's trying to make something that's appealing to a lot more of the audience. But also, as I said before, I don't think this is going to be a straight, colourful gags and, gags kind of franchise. I think that Gunn is doing something that he wants to do. There will be darkness, there will be death, there will be blood sometimes. So don't just expect something bright and bubbly. So I think Gunn will surprise people in that element. So until we see Superman Legacy, there's going to be the 2 sides of the fandom colliding. There's the people who are excited for DC Universe, who are big James Gunn fanboys and fangirls, and there's the people who despise James Gunn, mostly coming from the Snyderverse, the vocal Snyderverse fandom. But at the end of the day, if Superman Legacy works, those people will be silenced very quickly. If it doesn't work, you will hear their voice on the megaphone. And that's the point. And it'll be very interesting how everyone reacts later this year to Creature Commandos.